There are summers that change you, and then there are summers that change you in ways you can't account for, and the summer I spent in Harlow was the second kind. I've been trying to describe it properly for years, to find the right words for a place that felt simultaneously like somewhere I'd never been and somewhere I'd always known. And the closest I've gotten is this: Harlow was the kind of town that knows things, not the people in it specifically, though that was part of it. The town itself. The air, the streets, the particular quality of the light over the river in the evening. Harlow knew things. It knew me before I arrived, and it let me know that it knew me. Quietly, without making a big thing of it, the way old places do when they've been waiting patiently and are simply pleased that you finally turned up. The circumstances that brought me there were ordinary enough. I was between things. A job had ended. An apartment lease had run out. Nothing terrible had happened, but nothing was pulling me forward either. That particular suspended feeling of a life between chapters. A friend of a friend mentioned that his family had a small house in a rural town several hours from the city, and that they rented it out occasionally through the summer, and that it was currently available for a couple of months at a rate that was well within what I could manage. I had no particular plans. I said yes. I drove up on a Friday in June, arriving in the early afternoon when the light was the good kind, high and clear, and finding the house exactly as described. A small white clapboard thing on a quiet street near the center of town, a covered porch, a yard with a garden that had been let go a little but still had things in it that clearly knew what they were doing, a view from the back of a gentle slope running down toward the river. I parked, got my key from the lockbox, let myself in, and began the process of making a temporary place, mine enough to be comfortable in it. I walked into town that first evening to find somewhere to eat. The town center was what small Midwestern towns look like when they've held on. A main street with a diner and a hardware store and a small grocery and a bar and a couple of other businesses that seemed to be doing reasonably well. The whole thing scaled to the actual needs of a few thousand people rather than to any idea of tourism or growth. A bandstand in a small park. A library that looked like it had been the library since before anyone currently living could remember. The river running along the edge of things with an old stone bridge across it that was clearly older than most everything else. I went into the diner for dinner. A woman behind the counter, 50s, the comfortable efficiency of someone who has been in the same kitchen for a long time, looked up when I came in and said, "You must be in the Hendersons' place." I said yes, I was. I said I just arrived. She said, "Well, welcome. I'm Dot." She set a menu in front of me, but then said, "Though, actually, if you like the fish, I'd tell you what tonight's special is before you look at that." I said I liked fish. She told me the special, and I ordered it, and it was excellent. I thought nothing of this. Small towns notice newcomers, especially ones staying in known rental properties. Of course she knew where I was staying. I ate my dinner and walked back to the house and went to bed. The next morning I walked to the small grocery for a few things. The man behind the counter. Older, reading glasses, a deliberate way of moving that suggested he had long since stopped being in any hurry, looked up when I came in and said, "You settling in all right over on Birch?" Birch was the street the house was on. I said yes, fine, just picking up a few basics. He nodded and started telling me, unprompted, which of the local farms sold eggs and which of the farms sold the better eggs, and what day the bread at the bakery 2 doors down was freshest, and where to park if I wanted to walk the river trail without getting stuck in what he called the weekend congestion, which I came to understand meant about 15 cars. I thanked him and went home. Again, small town rental property word gets around, entirely explicable. But it continued and continued past the point where the small town word jets around explanation adequately covered it. The bartender at the bar on Main Street, when I stopped in that second evening, said, "You're the one at the Hendersons' place, right? What are you drinking?" Before I had said anything, the woman I passed while walking the river trail the next morning said good morning and added my name. Said my name correctly. A name she had no introduced via the Hendersons' rental property way of knowing. The librarian, when I went into the library on my third day, already had a book set aside that she said she thought I might like, based on, she said with a smile, a feeling she'd had. The book was one of my favorites, a novel I'd read 3 times and that I had never mentioned to anyone in Harlow, because I had not spoken to anyone in Harlow about books. She had set aside one of my 3 or 4 most loved novels for a stranger she had never met, based on a feeling she'd had. I sat with all of this over the first week, and I want to tell you that I sat with it in a spirit of genuine inquiry rather than alarm. Nothing threatening had happened. Nothing uncomfortable had happened. What had happened was that I had arrived in a town that seemed to have a degree of foreknowledge about me that shouldn't have been possible, and this foreknowledge was expressed entirely in the form of warmth and helpfulness and the particular ease of being somewhere where people seem to know what you need. It was not frightening. It was, honestly, one of the most comfortable feelings I had experienced in a long time. I asked Dot about it on my second week, over coffee in the diner in the mid-morning when it was quiet. I said, "Can I ask you something that might sound a little strange?" She said sure, pouring herself a cup and sitting down across from me with the ease of someone who had all the time in the world and intended to use it as she pleased. I said, "How did you know who I was when I walked in the first night?" She considered this, not in the way of someone buying time to invent something, but in the way of someone deciding how plainly to say a true thing. She said, "Harlow's a particular kind of town. It always has been. People who come here, the ones who are meant to come here, the town sort of knows them ahead of time. It's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, and I guess you have experienced it now. So maybe it's easier." I said, "What do you mean, meant to come here?" She said, "Not everyone who passes through gets the same welcome. Some people come through and they're just passing through, and that's fine, and nobody in particular notices them or knows them. And then some people arrive and it's like," she paused, reaching for it, "like the town has been expecting you, like you fit somewhere in it, and it knows where you fit before you do." I asked if she knew why, if there was a story, a history, an explanation for why Harlow was like this. She said, "There are stories, lots of them. The town's old and it has a long memory, and over the years people have tried to make sense of it in all kinds of ways. But honestly, I've lived here my whole life and I've stopped trying to explain it. It just is what it is. Some places are thin in certain ways, and Harlow is thin in this particular way, where it knows the people it's supposed to know. Thin," she used the same word Thomas had used, my neighbor who only went out at 3 a.m., the thin hours. Some places are thin in certain ways. I stayed for the full 2 months, and those 2 months were unlike any other period of my adult life in the specific quality of ease they had. The sense of being somewhere that made room for you and knew what room to make. I walked the river trail every morning. I ate at Dot's diner more often than was strictly necessary because the food was good, and because Dot was good company, and because the diner at mid-morning had a quality of unhurried contentment that I found I needed without knowing I needed it. I went to the library and talked with a librarian whose name was Frances about the books she set aside for me, which were always exactly right in ways that were hard to attribute to luck. I sat on my porch in the evenings and watched the particular light over the rooftops that small river towns have at dusk, that orange going pink, and I felt more like myself than I'd felt in years. People knew things about me in Harlow that they shouldn't have known, and they used that knowledge exclusively to be kind. The woman at the bakery knew I liked rye bread before I'd ordered it. The man who ran the hardware store when I stopped in for something minor told me something about the house's plumbing that turned out to be exactly what I needed to know to fix a drip that had been bothering me. The bartender remembered my drink from the second time I came in, which was not remarkable, and then asked how my mother was doing, which was because I had not mentioned my mother to him in any form. My mother had been having a health issue that summer, nothing critical but worrying, and he asked about her with the specific concern of someone who knew there was something to ask about. I asked him about it afterward, he said. "I don't know exactly how I knew, I just did." He said, "I hope she's better." She was, as it turned out, much better by the end of the summer. On my last evening I walked the river trail for the last time, and then sat on the old stone bridge and watched the water go by in the long June light that I was going to miss, the particular soft gold of a summer evening in a river valley, the swallows working the surface of the water, the sound of the town at rest. I sat there for a while, and I thought about the 2 months I was leaving and what I was going to carry from them. Dot found me there, not by coincidence, I thought, but by the mechanism that operated in Harlow, the thin place knowledge. She sat beside me on the bridge wall, and we were quiet for a while. And then she said, "You'll come back." I said, "I hope so." She said, "No, I mean, you'll come back. It's one of those things. Some people, the town lets them go, and that's that. Some people, it keeps a thread on. You're the thread kind." I asked what that meant practically. She said, "It means something will bring you back when the time is right. Could be years, but something will. And when you come back, it'll be like you never left, except you'll have changed, and the town will know that too, and it'll make room for who you are then." She paused. "That's how it works with the thread kind." I drove home the next morning. The summer was over, and the life waiting for me in the city was a reasonable life, and I was glad to go back to it. But I was right that I would miss the light and the river, and Dot's diner and the library, and the particular ease of being somewhere that knew me. I haven't been back yet, 7 years, and I haven't been back. Not because I don't want to, but because something has always been slightly, not the right time, close, but not quite. I think about what Dot said, that something will bring me back when the time is right. I find I believe it. I find I'm not in a hurry because I trust the mechanism. There's a thread. I can feel it sometimes, very faint, the particular pull of a place that knows where you are and is keeping track. Not impatiently, just keeping track, the way Harlow kept track of things, the way a place with a long memory and no particular urgency keeps track of the people it's decided to hold on to. I'll go back when it's time. The river will be there and the diner will be there, and Dot will look up when I walk in and say something that tells me she knew I was coming before I did. And I'll sit down and she'll tell me the special and I'll order it and it'll be exactly what I wanted. Sleep well tonight. Somewhere out there is a place that knows you're coming. Maybe you haven't been there yet. Maybe you've been and left and you're being held on a long thread until it's time to go back. Either way, it's waiting. It already knows your name. Good night.